Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Season 5, Episode 6.
Welcome back, friends. Today we drove over the state line to Bloomington, Minnesota to chat with a real character. Well, many characters. It just depends on the day, it seems. So welcome to the show, Midnight Mary.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, you have me over at your apartment, so thank you. Your place is quite spooky. I enjoy it.
Thank you.
What's your favorite thing in this house? I mean, you showed me this, is it a pickled octopus? What is that?
It's a taxidermy octopus that sits on my mantle.
That's pretty epic. The fact that you have a mantle, I thought I was like part of this exclusive club, which I guess we're both part of the exclusive club, but I don't have one of those things. Anyways, so who are you and what are you passionate about?
Yeah, I'm Midnight Mary. I'm very passionate about cosplay. It's something that I've always been passionate about when I was younger, very interested in it. And it's just always been a continuous love of mine, even throughout all these years.
Is it because you love Halloween?
It started out with me liking Halloween and me just dressing up and also being very into DIY crafts and stuff. So obviously you mix those two together and you practically get cosplay.
What's the first costume you can remember making?
Yeah, my first costume I remember making was Poison Ivy back in 2012. It was a big con crunch sort of thing. I made it in 2 weeks. And it was just hot glue on a bodysuit and went out because my hair was already red. I didn't have to worry about a wig or anything. I went out to a local con.
And you just had the best time ever. And it was I have to do, I got to take this shit more seriously on the next one because people are stoked on this and I know I can do better.
It was me knowing I could do better. But then even back then, my resources were very limited. So I worked with what I could. So even looking back now, I'm just I can step that up way better. Because Poison Ivy it's kind of a hot mess.
Sure. Well, you got to start somewhere.
Oh,
so,
definitely.
We'll get more to some of that. But for now, I always like to bring this up so that way people know how to get a hold of you. Because I talked to you off mic about this, but there's a million platforms, right? People can text people can FaceTime or whatever, Facebook message or Snapchat, or they do Instagram, whatever. What is your preferred way if somebody is listening and then they listen to the whole episode and they're like, damn, this chick sounds so cool. What's the best way that people can follow you? How can they get in contact?
Honestly, the best way would probably be Instagram. And my handle on there is midnight_Mary_. And then it's basically the same for every other platform on there too. And I also have all my links in the bio, so it's all right there for you too.
Yeah, I finally was a professional this past week. I did. I finally got Linktree and put that on there instead of, clearly that's what everyone should be doing. And TikTok is the biggest platform for you, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Yeah, I got to learn how to we should have, maybe we still could. You should do some makeup on me to make me look wild. And then we could take a couple photos. I'm probably not going to actually get on TikTok. Anyways, so where are you from? Because we're in Bloomington, right? But you're from Wisconsin, correct? Appleton or something?
Yeah, I grew up in the Fox Valley area in Wisconsin.
That's by Appleton. That's what that's called?
Yep.
Okay, between Green Bay or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So why are you in Minnesota?
I ended up moving here to Minnesota because my partner and I were long distance and we didn't want to be long distance anymore. And he got a job out here. So then we decided to close that distance gap.
Yeah, and now you guys are both in this big city. And we went to Anime Detour together. When we did that, 2 years ago, were you were already living in Minneapolis?
Yes. Yep.
So has it been way better for you as far as the con scene or in general, with cosplay? Has it been a lot easier for you out in this zone?
It definitely has. For me, there's been a way better group of people I've been able to get in contact with, and I've been able to meet some amazing friends. Started off on social media, just finding people that were local and then seeing them at the conventions and just waving and being hey, you're so-and-so. And just meeting all these people and even like going to like other conventions in other cities, and they still will follow and like go to these too.
Well, that's
So
the cool
really
part about that like whole community. You know what I mean? I always try to explain to people. So I went to my first convention. This was like 2011, maybe. I think I'd like just turned 21. And a friend of mine was like, hey, I go to Anime Detour every year. You watch anime. You should come with me to this thing. And I was like, you know, the rest of the 99% of the world where I was like, dude, I don't know. Fat Guys as Sailor Moon sounds kind of lame. Like, I don't know if I want to do that. He's like, dude, you have no idea. This place is way sicker than that. And so I grudgingly was like, all right, fine, I'll go. And I went, had like the best weekend ever. Like, I didn't realize anime conventions are basically like the coolest Halloween party that's a weekend long, except nobody fights because nobody has an ego.
Yeah.
It's just like the coolest shit ever.
Yeah. Even if you like don't cosplay and you just like some like nerdy things or whatever, you can go there, instantly find like some sort of connection with people to talk about. And like everybody just has a great time.
Well, and you know how like when you're a kid, you go to Disney World and you're so excited because you want to go like see Mickey or whatever and take a picture with them, right? In the convention world, I didn't realize this till I went there. There's so many cosplayers that like don't even have social media, but there's so many cosplayers that like these people put a year of time into making these dope costumes. I didn't realize it's a whole culture of like collecting pictures with characters. Like that's a whole thing there. And it's like the sickest because there's probably 100 people dressed up really well as all these cool things. The best one, in my opinion, that I saw, and it's not even just anime, right? I went. And you remember that Lonely Island thing that they did with Justin Timberlake, and I think it was Andy Samberg, where they did the Box song?
Yep.
The first year I went, there was 3 guys, one as just like their backup dude, walking around in the suits with the sunglasses with their beard shaved that way. And the one dude had a boombox or whatever, was walking in front. And the other 2 had their presents like over their junk. And they would stop in the middle of the hallway. The dude would walk up, set the boombox on the ground and play that song. And then they would dance like the whole stupid routine. And I was like, this is the best costume I think I've ever seen. And I really appreciate it. So for people who have no scope, like that's the type of shit that you can see here, as well as Midnight Mary and probably myself moving forward. But so the first thing that I remember, so I've known your partner for a long time. So the first thing I remember he was saying, well, the first time I heard of you, he's like, yeah, she was on this poster. And he like showed me. He's like, yeah, she was in Spencer's. It's pretty cool. And I was like, what? How the hell is somebody getting Spencer's? And I've known you for years now and I've never asked. So I got to know, like, how in the world and why were you on a poster that was sold in Spencer's however many years ago?
Yeah. So way back when, before I even like started doing cosplay, I was very into much self-shooting and doing portraits and stuff. So I would just make a bunch of like stock photos and upload them to DeviantArt. So somebody found one of my stock photos and ended up using it to like make this really cool photo. And they like credited me on the site and everything. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And at the time they were like, hey, this might get like picked up as a poster. I'll keep in touch. They still kept in touch, but then said it didn't get picked through. It just got passed by. And I'm like, oh, darn, like cool. Don't have to worry about that. Years later, I'm working at the mall. And I go to Spencer's on my break because I'm bored out of my mind, need to walk around and not just stare at the same wall. And I'm flipping through the posters and I see myself. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And I'm like looking and I'm like, I know this is me. And I looked on my Facebook because I used it as a profile photo also. And it's definitely me, like same facial expression, same everything. And I like bought it and went up to the cashier. I'm like, would you believe me if I said this was me on this poster? And she's like, no. And I'm like, well, it's me. Trust me. I can make the same facial expression right now. And it made my day. I like ran back to my store and like told my managers and everything, plastered it everywhere. Because I never in a million years would I think I would be able to say you could buy a poster of me at Spencer's. And you can like find it on like different platforms now. And it's weird because like some people bought the poster for like their grandmother and like she has it up on like her wall and stuff like this, and it's like everywhere.
That's
It's
like
wild.
that's the weird power of the internet at this point is you don't know the consumer.
Yeah.
Because like in a normal like personal relationship, you get to know everybody.
Yeah.
But at things like cosplay or anything else, right? Like you're selling prints and stuff on Etsy, and it's like you have no idea like who these people are that have this stuff. Or I have people come up to me and talk to me about the show, and I'm like, they know all this information about me because we're 40 however many episodes in, and I'm like, you've listened to me talk a lot and I have no idea who you are. That's so cool, but so kind of weird at the same time in a good way.
Yeah.
In a good way, because like the only things I put out there publicly are things I want people to hear, but it still definitely is like, holy. Okay. So what was the time frame, I guess, of when this poster happened? Was this before you got into cosplay? Was it like after the fact? Like what, I guess, DeviantArt was something that was a while ago, but in general, how did that process happen? What time frame was that?
I believe that was when I was like 20, and I'm like 27 now.
So you started cosplaying when you were still in high school?
I was 18 when I first started doing cosplay.
Gotcha. So you did the poison ivy thing, and then it was after that you decided to do this. When was it that you were like, okay, I'm gonna like take it more seriously? I mean, it's still like people see stuff, and I was talking to you again about this off mic, and they're like, oh, you have 300,000 followers on TikTok, you must make a lot of money. And you're like, it doesn't necessarily translate that way. Support your local artists, please. Right? When did you get to the point where you started investing money? Right? And we can talk more about like how teamwork works with that stuff. But when was it that you're like, okay, I'll actually invest money into these cosplays and take this thing kind of to the next level? Yeah.
I always wanted to make something that I was super proud of all the time. So when I ended up moving to Minnesota about like 4 years ago, I ended up like taking everything like way more seriously, wanted to up my game, knew I could do it, and just like saw all of these amazing creative people. And I'm like, hey, I want to do something like that too. So then I just like made sure, I'm just like, oh, I want to keep doing this, and like putting all of the talents and resources that I ended up learning and continue to learn, and put that to like whatever project that I'm doing. And I'll even like reach out to like a lot of my like cosplay friends to be like, hey, I don't know how to do XYZ. Do you have any tips? And it's very much everybody helping each other out, and just like making sure that like everybody can push each other to be the best possible person they can be.
Well, the funny part is like Americans, like I feel like we have this competitive nature because that's like what we're brought up, right? Is to compare ourselves to the next person and say, how can we beat them? Which is really silly, because within any space, whether it's cosplay or anything else, there's so much room. It's not like you could ever command the entire floor anyway. So why don't you just ask the people around you to help? Because realistically, people within your friend group, if they're helping you to succeed, it doesn't take from them. In fact, because they're your friend, it probably helps them out as well. It's like we can all grow and benefit from each other instead of looking out like for ourselves. If we just look out like, how can we all help each other? Everything can be so much easier because everybody has different resources.
Right. Like one of my friends, Jesslyn Cupcake, she's really good at sewing, really good at painting. So like when I was struggling with a big sewing project, big con crunch, I reached out to her. I'm like, hey, I don't know how to work with 4-stretch fabric. I need some help. And like every step of the way, I'm just like, hey, I don't really know what I'm doing. Can you kind of explain? And she would always make sure to be like, hey, this is what you need to do. I can send like some links, some resources. You got this. And she like always made sure to just like be there for me, which was amazing.
Yeah, I think people think they're alone, and you know what I mean? It's more like if you can be willing to put yourself out there and ask for help, it's like kind of amazing how many people out there are actually willing to help. People are much more willing to help than most people, I think, realize, because people are too afraid to ask. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And like everybody has like a different thought process on things. So when you're having like a struggle or something that like you don't know how to execute properly, somebody else may have already done it or have done it but knows how to do it in a more efficient or cheaper way, and they can definitely help you with that. So it's always like reach out to people, like look online. YouTube helps. I've looked on Pinterest, and you would not believe how many cosplay tips are on Pinterest. That blows my mind.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the big thing that I try to tell people too is like money doesn't have to be involved, but you should look at like how can you mutually benefit each other. That's how good networking works, you know, when it comes down to it. So if all of a sudden you're asking this one other cosplayer for help all the time on something, just think like, okay, well, what can I do for this person in exchange? I probably have something that they could also use, whether it's like you can get them an in with somebody, or maybe you are good at, you know, X while they're good at Y, and you can help them with that or whatever. If you're willing to always like put back and help the people who are helping you, then they're going to want to help you time and time again. So let's play a game called Rapid Fire. I stole this idea from one of my favorite podcasts called The Bunt Live. So I'm hoping if one of them or both of them ever listens, they don't see it as like a diss, like I'm sorry I stole it, but it's because it's great content. So I hope they think of it as a compliment. But anyways, I'm going to ask a bunch of questions, and without you really thinking much, just throw whatever your answer is. And we can discuss it. Like if you say it and you're like, but I want afterwards, you want to elaborate, you can. Okay. You ready?
Sure.
Favorite animal?
Cat.
Last meal you made?
Chicken patty.
Favorite beverage?
Tequila.
Favorite movie?
Repo.
Favorite pastime outside of cosplay?
TikTok.
Favorite music artist right now?
Ash Nico.
Favorite podcast to listen to?
Unfiltered.
It's not even mine. Favorite anime right now?
Death Note.
Yes. Favorite video game right now?
BioShock.
Favorite cosplay you've ever done?
Mad Moxie.
Favorite annual convention?
Anime Detour.
Anime. Preferred sub or dub?
Sub.
Best dubbed anime you've ever watched?
Soul Eater.
They're all horrible.
Soul Eater is so good.
No, I mean the dubbed version of like everything. I feel like.
Soul Eater dubbed is fantastic, and I will fight you on it.
All right, fair. I watched it dubbed too. Hero or villain?
Villain.
Most watched streaming service?
Netflix.
Best sequel or spinoff?
How to Train Your Dragon.
Okay, most disappointing sequel or spinoff?
All of them.
Yes. Best part about being, quote, cosplay famous?
Creative people.
What's the worst part about it?
Creative people.
Creepy people, I think, probably.
Maybe.
What's your favorite thing about me?
You sparkle.
I'm just with you. I'm surprised you answered.
You asked.
Okay, so realistically, going back to the real conversation though, why did you get into cosplay? Were you huge into anime and like video gaming and stuff through high school? Like, why did you even do the Ivy thing in the first place?
Growing up, actually, anime wasn't really allowed. Neither were video games. Like, the only video games I grew up on were the old-time arcade games that you, like, plugged into your TV. So I was really good at, like, Galaga and Mappy.
Oh, sweet.
Really good at those. Otherwise, like, growing up, like, me and my sister would wake up super early. We would watch, like, 4Kids, like, 7 o'clock. We would wake up on Saturday and watch, like, Tokyo Mew Mew and, like, stuff like that. And then, like, go back to bed and act like we didn't get up early and like watch anime on the TV. But then like when phones that had the capability of YouTube to be on it, I sat there and would go like, or on Host High School Club, whatever, episode 1, whatever, and part 3. And it would always be like that. And that's just what I did. I was go through YouTube and do like the OG like way to search for things, and then it just kind of went from there because then I had Facebook, and then I found like Yaya Han and like a lot of big cosplayers and would follow them there, and then made my own Facebook, and then it just kind of like went from there.
Yes, yeah, I didn't watch a lot of anime when I was growing up outside of like what was on Toonami. When I was a kid, I watched like hard. I'm a huge Dragon Ball fan, right? Mm-hmm. But I would watch that and Yu Yu Hakusho and stuff. So I'd watch that. And then a friend of mine in high school or middle school even, he had, I forget which one. I think it was Onegai Teacher or something. But he had some random one that wouldn't have been on Toonami that was like a romance anime. And me at 12 years old, I was like, I kind of dig this. Mm-hmm. And ever since, I'm a huge romantic. I love romantic comedies and all that shit. Mm-hmm. And so I would watch a little bit of those. And then it was when I went to college. I went to college up at UMD, and my college roommate also skated and watched anime. And he was like, dude, you got to come with me to the anime club. And I was like, dude, I don't know. And so I did. And I was like, dude, these are kind of my people. Like, I dig these people. It was like not crazy long after that, then, you know, that anime detour and stuff came into my life and I started doing that. And then I went to that like pretty much every year for a long time. So my first convention was Anime Detour. Like I said, I think 2011 maybe. What was the first convention you ever went to? Can you kind of recall the experience?
Yeah, my first ever convention was KitsuneCon back home in Wisconsin. And that was when I did Poison Ivy. And I think I did 3 years consistently of going to that con. And it was like really fun. And I went with like my best friend ever.
Was that like a weekend long thing or was it like a day? Like how did my experience, because I've only ever gone to Anime Detour where it's like you get a hotel room for the weekend, you walk around, maybe you're drinking, maybe you're not, but you're seeing people dressed up as cool things, going to panels. There's like the big like rave dance thing on the Saturday night. Well, both nights, I guess. How did that, like what was that convention like?
That one is always a weekend long convention. And when I first went to it, it was at like this really small hotel and they ended up having to like move locations because it got significantly bigger because it's like one of the bigger cons like back in Wisconsin. So it would be just this weekend thing. And I would only go on Saturday. I would go for like one day my first year. And then the next year, my friend was just like, yo, let's go 2 days. Because Sunday's free, even though like it's like a pack up thing, but you can still see people dressed like walking around in like cosplays and stuff like that. So we would do both days and I would just like sleep over at her house and we would go the next day.
That's awesome. Yeah, for me, like the first time I ever went, I was already 21. So I was like, I'm trying to stay at the hotel room and get drunk. Actually the first time that I ever went, and I don't want to say like conventions are about drinking because it really isn't. It just depends on where you're at within your own life, but you can drink and indulge if you wanted to. But I got like one of the more drunk times I've ever been, which was not what I was expecting going into it. But I was just having that much fun because it just seemed like this party was the first time that I ever went to Anime Detour. It was like one of the gnarlier nights of my whole lifetime, I would want to say. Well, anyways, so the first time that we went to a convention together, this was Anime Detour a couple of years ago. You dressed up as Moxie. And you already had a bunch of people that like knew about you, right? Within the cosplay world. What was the first cosplay that like actually popped off and gathered some attention? Was it the Moxie one?
When I came back into cosplay, it was definitely Moxie. Moxie was something that kind of like got me back into cosplay, got me practically out of like cosplay retirement. And I was fully committed to that cosplay and like loved it. And then I ended up like remade the jacket and made her iconic red jacket and everything.
How did you learn how to even do like her in particular? It's like a specific art style for that video game. How did you learn to do that makeup stuff? Was it totally trial and error by yourself or did you find some kind of tutorial on Pinterest or what?
There's a lot of good tutorials on Instagram, actually. There's a lot of people that will post their like how they do it and like tutorials. And when it comes to like that style, which like Borderlands cell shading, one thing I enjoy about Borderlands cosplays is that even though like there's one like style, there's so many different ways to do cell shading and each one always looks great. Like, cause like how I cell shade something is completely different to like how some of my friends will do it. But it always looks great and it always looks like it's a part of Borderlands. And that's something that I really enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, it stands out. Like everyone knows who you are for sure. When we were walking around, like I always put a good amount of time and attention into my cosplays, but clearly not as much as you do because I'm like always stoked. People are stoked about mine. And then I was with you and I'm like, well, I'm like such a loser next to you because everyone wanted a picture with you. So I wanted to address this because people don't get this. They think that like people who have these epic cosplays that they do 100% of it themselves, which is not necessarily true, right? People help each other just like as if you were in a play or something. People help with sets and different things. So just for an example, the Moxie thing, I knew you didn't do 100% of that yourself. And I guess you don't have to say the specific people you don't want to, but in general, like, what does it look like to put together something on that level? How many people would somebody normally work with? How many people maybe you worked with? Like, who made what parts of it?
Right. When it comes to the red jacket, I had my partner's mom actually helped me with the pattern with that. Because like I wanted it to be like stretchy and more form-fitting, and I wanted the torso to be longer than my previous jacket. So I had her help me with that. And then I was always reaching out to Jesslyn Cupcake to help with like the sewing and stuff. Otherwise, it was me sitting here figuring out the stencil for the jacket and like painting all of that. But like even when it comes to like props and stuff, what I really enjoy is like 3D printing has become very popular. And like with like little props and stuff like that, I'll go on like Etsy and you can find like even 3D patterns. So if you have your own machine, you can do that. And I will just get like the 3D object and use that. I've done it for like Chi from Chobits, her ears. I got that from Chompworks. And I have a Pluto staff, still haven't put that together. And I have a bunch of 3D printed stuff that I still have yet to sand down.
But you don't have, do you have a 3D printer, or is that you have somebody do that?
I do not have a 3D printer, no. There's so many people on Etsy that will commission and like do their own like stuff to where it's all like already set and go and they can just like ship it out instantly.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, people ask me that about my skateboard shop, like, oh, you must press all the boards and stuff. And I'm like, no, like, in order for that to be cost-effective time and all that, like, you kind of have to have somebody that does that for a living. So it makes sense to do that. Talking about TikTok, because, like, all I really know is people dancing around, or your TikTok's, like, really very entertaining to watch for sure. Partially just because I like cosplay, but like I think it's the exact platform to try to show something like cosplay because it's like such a short form video content like that.
Right.
When did you get into TikTok? When did it become like a thing you actually worked on a lot?
Right. I think it was 2019. Somebody came up to me. They're just like, hey, you should join TikTok. And at that time, it was an app that wasn't very like popular with like the older crowd, aka anybody over 20. It was still very much a children's app. So I'm just like, I don't know. And they're like, no, there's like cosplayers on here. Like you'll love it. So I ended up joining it. And sure enough, like I loved it. And just like from me going on there and taking this person's word for it that like I'm gonna like it, it like helped me like step up my cosplay game to be like, hey, I want to do more cosplays, I want to make more videos. And at the time I didn't have like a whole lot of cosplay stuff, so it helped me get out of my like cosplay rut. And then it got me like even thinking about like lighting and sets, and like I have like so many ring lights and like fun little colorful lights and stuff like that, and like even think about transitions, and it just makes you think more out of the box and more of like a skit sort of thing sometimes. But then sometimes you make friends on there too, just by like duetting other cosplayers, and you can make like this cool movie, and there's all these fun, interesting ideas that people can bounce around, and like you can have like groups of people, and it's so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, social media is like that in general. I've made a lot of friends through social media. It just depends on like how you use the tool, right? Like on what is it you're trying to get out of it, and how can you get those things. So before TikTok, was it Instagram or like where? Because when we went to Anime Detour, people already knew about you, so your content was somewhere. Where were you putting your content before that?
I had it on Instagram, but at Anime Detour, I made one TikTok, met up with you at Anime Detour, walked through the door, and before I even got to you, like 5 minutes into the convention, a girl looked at me and said, I saw you on TikTok. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? I uploaded that like 20 minutes ago. And she's like, yeah, no, I totally saw you on TikTok. And I'm like, dude, that's nuts. And that was like the first time that ever happened to me. And it was so instant, and I will never forget that. It's
so crazy when anyone recognizes you from anything. Like around my town, you know, people are like, oh, you own the skateboard shop, right? And I'm like, yeah, you know, but there was one time, and I've mentioned this now a few times just because it still blows my mind. But there was one time I was at a pawn shop and somebody came up to me and like, they're kind of like, I don't know, being slightly awkward about it. And then just finally was like, hey, so are you on the radio? And I'm like, why, yes, I am on the radio. And he's like, I knew I recognized your voice. You do that show. And I'm like, I do that. You recognize. You're my favorite person now. Yeah, that definitely happened to me. Okay. So, well, also, yeah, it's funny with something like TikTok, how that blows up. Cause like, have you heard of Clubhouse yet?
No.
Yeah. So see, that's a new app that you have to be invited to be on. That's like, I haven't even really looked into it yet, but I got invited to be on by somebody the other day.
Okay.
But it's some kind of new social media that has something to do with like networking and different things. But anyways, these types of things pop up all the time. So who knows if that's going to be anything, but you never know. And it's funny where it's like, you look at it a year after something pops off and you're always smacking yourself like, God, why didn't get on it? Why didn't I get on that? So the big question, this is really where it comes down to. I talk to people about this all the time where, the show, it's an inspirational storytelling experience where I interview unique guests that are also pursuing careers based on their passions. You're a cosplayer. People would say that's not a career. I mean, everyone can shut the f- up. You do whatever you want. But you can make money doing just about anything, right? There's always ways to make money doing it somehow. So the big question is, how does somebody who's doing cosplay monetize it? Like, how do you at least recover some of the costs of making all this and making, like, how do you make any money doing it?
Right. Like, one thing I personally do is, like, I do sell prints. I know a lot of people will sell like patterns and they'll sell like wig tutorials, and you do a lot of commissions and stuff like that. Or they'll even, if they're good at editing, they'll be like, hey, I can help you edit, or like you do shoot your stuff, send me photos, I can edit for like whatever price or something like that. There's so many different ways and different things you can do to make money with cosplay if that's something that you're willing and wanting to do.
Yeah, I think it's just about finding a place within the space. So I talk to kids about this all the time at the shop. Everyone wants to be a pro skateboarder. Like, I agree. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a pro skateboarder. Like, that's great. However, I always like to explain to kids, like, look at me. I'm not a pro skateboarder, but I still found a way to do skateboarding for a living within that space. Right. So if you're willing to like look at it and say, okay, I don't need to necessarily need to get paid for dressing up as Harley Quinn. However, if I'm good at it, now I'm in with the right people and I can do things within that space to make money. If you're willing to be like creative in that way, I think there's opportunities to make money doing just about anything. You know what I mean? Like there's always going to be ways to do it. So then the question follows of, how can somebody who's listening that's stoked on you, they went and they watched like all these Moxie videos and they saw you as Chi and they saw you as Ivy or whatever, the Chucky ones you put up, you've been like a million characters. How can people best support you? Because you have like a bunch of things on your link tree.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot. Right now I'm focusing a lot on like Instagram and like upping my like self photography and stuff. So that's something that like I'm focusing on right now, because it's something that I kind of didn't focus on so much when I was more into doing TikTok. So I'm focusing more back on Instagram and doing like a lot of moody self portraits, and like I have a really good idea to do a self shoot within like the basement here, and it's going to be epic, and I am pumped.
Awesome. So I always tell people like there's a lot of ways to support, right? They can hit the little bell notification. They can like and subscribe, bro. Like there's all kinds of cool ways to do, but like you also have even like wish lists and stuff, right? Like on your link tree for like props that you need.
Yeah.
If somebody right now is like, Mary, she's got all these followers on TikTok, but I know she wants to make these videos. Maybe she needs something. Maybe I can help out in some kind of way. You don't have a Patreon like I do. How can somebody help in their own little way?
Like just following me is so much. It means so much for like somebody to just like find me on Twitter and like interact with me, because then I'm just like, oh man, like I recognize like people that sit there and like comment on things, and then like I get to know like you guys like a lot more and like the fan base, and it's so great to see it that way. But then like I also will randomly like come home and I'm like, ooh, there's a package, and I get like so excited, because then I'm just like, somebody out there is like rooting for me and like wants to see me succeed, and it just makes me really excited, because then I can do like little unboxing things, and I know some people get really excited about that, which I also have a Easter Nezuko coming out that somebody sent me, and I am pumped for that as well.
That's super dope. Yeah, because it's not about like getting, I love that you put on there, like you have like a little Amazon wish list and stuff, but I love that it's not just like you want personally. It's like stuff that you want for your cosplay that is just like, dude, you guys, this is kind of hard to afford, but I'll make if I can get a hold of this.
Yeah.
So I really love how you have that set up.
Mhm.
So I mentioned before on your Instagram, now you have like a link tree, right? And I have a link tree that has Spotify, has my Patreon. You can get to Apple Apple Podcasts from there. You can get to my website, passionpod.org, where you can buy all kinds of cool shit. But those are the things that I have on mine. I noticed on yours, yes, you have all your contact like spots like that, but then you also have several causes, right? You have one thing where it's like a link to all different petitions you can sign, and then you have one that's like something to do with transgender something.
Yeah.
What can you explain those and like why they're on there?
Yeah, I have a link for free binders. It's from an organization called Point of Pride. They are a nonprofit, and I ended up finding them a while ago and like bookmarked it because I wanted to like update everything, and I wanted to make sure to put it in there because they give out free binders for anybody who needs them, and also will ship them discreetly if you are unsafe to like get anything with like labels or anything on that. They make sure to like ship it discreetly, so then if you're unsafe or anything like within your household or anything like that, you're fine. There's also like a way to go onto their website from my link, and you can like help fund and donate to like this cause. They take like lightly used binders, so like if you have one that you don't really use anymore, or it wasn't the right size or anything like that, there's a way to like donate to them, so then they can get out to like people that need it. And like even with the petitions that started with like the Black Lives Matter movement, and that was something that like I was very passionate about, and every time I go on to like that one link, more and more things just keep popping up, which is like sad, but also in the same point, like everybody's eyes are opening more up to like the world and noticing like a bunch of things that need to go forward in the right direction. So it's always great to like see a bunch of different organizations and see different petitions and people speaking out about like a bunch of issues in the world.
Yeah, I think people need to always look at like, what are you in a position to do realistically, right? So like when the Black Lives Matter protests, like the big one in Minneapolis when that happened, I had several people reach out to me saying, what is Passion going to do for Black Lives Matter? You know, this happened, a bunch of people, they're like, and I even had a couple people saying, I'd love to see a significant donation from Passion Board Shop for Black Lives Matter. And I was like, well, okay, can you, I'm not even going to respond to these people, but realistically, it was like, look at the position that anybody is in and what they can do, right? You're asking a small business that just got shut down during the pandemic to make a significant donation.
Yeah.
That's not realistic. None of us have any money. We can't really do that. But rather than just writing it off and saying, well, I'm just not going to do anything, if we just look at what are we capable of doing, and then like outside of the Black Lives Matter thing in general, like what are we capable of doing at any point in time? If you're in a position where you have a following, which is, more than most of your friends, you all of a sudden have a platform to do something that doesn't even cost you any money. Right? Where it's like almost your responsibility to be able to speak up about those types of things. And it was the same way. Like I got a bunch of keychains or whatever that got made that we were selling specifically to donate money to Black Lives Matter, and helped do this big mural that we have in Eau Claire now. That's like a big Black Lives Matter thing. That was even supposed to be in my parking lot initially, but our landlords wouldn't let it happen. It was like, look, here are some other things that I could do where I didn't have to spend a bunch of money, but I could still support it. And I just want to say that I'm like stoked that that's something that you put some kind of attention to specifically, because not that many people do. And it's really not that incredibly difficult to do something like that.
Yeah, it's something super easy, and it is absolutely like the bare minimum. And the fact that like some people don't even recognize or do that kind of blows my mind. And like even when everything with the Black Lives Matter movement was happening, like, because I'm here in Minnesota, like seeing it all unfold, and like even at my workplace, like everybody's like kind of freaking out, and I'm just like, everybody's hurt, and like seeing everything unfold, I ended up like closing my Etsy shop beforehand. I ran like a sale and then matched all the profits and donated all of that. So I'm like, there's a bare minimum thing I can do. I donated all of that. And if you're like a part of the cosplay community, like a lot of people push that cosplay is for everyone because it is. There's no set look or anything when it comes to that. Like everybody has the same passion for it. So it's something that you should always be uplifting for. And if you sit there and say that cosplay is for everybody, but then like don't support these issues or recognize it, that's kind of strange and kind of defeats that.
Yeah, well, it's just about like trying to be as inclusive as possible, you know, and that's one thing I really love about like when I went to Anime Detour the very first time. I was like, I've never been somewhere where I felt this like accepted, you know, which is really, really rad. I always explain to people, it's like you get all the nerds together and none of them were cool. So none of them are going to cool guy you, but inadvertently that turns them into the coolest people that exist. It's really rad. To touch back on the binder thing, just because I'm sure a lot of people aren't familiar because I'm not fully familiar, that is it like the opposite of like a corset for transgender people that originally identified as female that are now identifying, like I'm not really sure what role it plays or what it is. Can you fill me in?
So the purpose of what a chest binder is to flatten your breast tissue. So there are many people that I know that wear them, whether they be transgender or non-binary or whatever they want to, whatever pronouns they wish to use or anything like that. It helps them be more comfortable with who they want to be. And that is very important. And it helps it makes everybody comfortable with who they are, who they want to be. And it just makes everybody happy. And I love seeing people like open up their first binder and like put it on and like seeing them so happy, just seeing like their shirts like lay flat and they get so happy and so excited. And it is one of the best things to like see somebody actually glow and smile because they feel confident for probably one of the first times in their life. And that is wonderful to see.
That's such a cool thing that you can do through cosplay in general, right? Is you can become the person that you want to. And people ask me all the time, like, why do you wear Hawaiian shirts all the time? And I always tell them the same thing. I say, well, I like to dress as my ideal self. And my ideal self is chilling on a beach, relaxing, wearing one of these shirts. So that's why I wear them all the time, right? But everybody's like ideal self, what they want to look like is different. So it's cool when there's something like that and it's just a tool that people want to have access to, being able to help people to have access to the tools they need to look the way that they feel inside. That's pretty powerful. That's pretty cool, I think. People are weird on the internet all the time. I mean, we meet weird people who end up being really cool, but people could be weird on the internet all the time. I don't really get too much of it. I mostly just get people that are like stoked on what I'm doing on the internet. I think women, unfortunately, get a lot of unwanted attention a lot of times. So if I like to assume that when people send a message, it's like with the best intentions, they're just like trying to be nice and maybe they're, getting this across wrong. But if a fan wants to interact with you or any other cosplayer, can you give us some do's and don'ts for what, or maybe how they should interact that will make you feel good rather than kind of weirded out?
One thing to like never do is be, hey, I like this cosplay, but, and then whatever afterwards, just don't say it. Just be like, I love your cosplay. Or don't do, hey, I like your cosplay, but this person does it better. Don't compare people. Never do that. Everybody does their best job, and seeing everybody's different take on like the same character is one of my favorite things to see. And then one thing that kind of bothers me a little bit is when people say, hey, this is so canon, because it looks like exactly like the character. But sometimes that comes across negatively when it comes to cosplay trying to, or being inclusive to everybody and like trying to make sure that everybody feels included. That sometimes that is a word that could be taken wrong or differently, and some people may not take it the way you have typed it out to be.
Sure, I could see that. Plus, I feel like with cosplay to a certain degree, maybe I'm wrong here, but you like to have your own spin on things, right? Or a lot of people do, and you don't necessarily want to be exactly what people would envision that character to be. You want to be your own version of it,
Right?
Right?
Yeah.
Gotcha. So I get to this point of the show, and I ask this on every episode. Whenever you're doing something like kind of unique outside of your typical like 9 to 5 whatever job that people do, which is fine if you have a 9 to 5 whatever job, we've all had jobs. But when you do something unique, you end up like kind of having crazy stories, and right? Like you get into kind of strange positions, whatever that thing is. I've had all kinds of ridiculous stories. I was telling you one off mic about how I was just in Los Angeles and was sitting on a rooftop in Hollywood with this dude. And I was like, how in the hell did I end up being up here? Mm-hmm. Can you share a story, or like a specific story, something unique that happened to you that you're really grateful for? Something that was just like, this was awesome, but it only happened because you were doing all this cosplay stuff.
Yeah. One thing that is the main thing that pops into my head is when Borderlands 3 was announced. The Borderlands community just like went nuts because like nobody really saw it coming. And like I remember sitting on the TV just like watching it, was like pumped. And then like I got into contact with Jesslyn Cupcake, and that's how we became friends. So like both of us are pumped for this game. And then all of a sudden like they're just like, hey, we're going to have this party, this launch party. And if you're a cosplayer, or if you want to come, just fill out this like questionnaire thing. And you just had to put your name, your email, and then if you cosplay, what character. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. I like told Jesslyn, I'm just like, yo, you doing it too? She's like, yeah, of course I'm doing it. So we both put it in, we both got accepted, and we both got to go to the Borderlands 3 launch party, which was nuts and crazy. It was wonderful. There were so many different Borderlands cosplayers that were there. There were a bunch of the voice actors. I got to meet the voice actress of Moxie there, and it was one of the best nights of my life.
That's so awesome. It's funny, like you get to know like one person or whatever. I mean, people are just people, obviously. So like when you meet people like that, you're going to be all starstruck, and then you talk to them and it's like, oh, these are like normal people.
Oh, 100%.
But my brother-in-law, Tom Gray, he was on season 2, I think, of the show, but he used to do this YouTube channel called Player Piano, where he produced it, and he had this classically trained pianist. They would take like some kind of fandom, and they did this one of Star Wars, right? Mm-hmm. And he had I think it was 3 different grand pianos that were all like from Star Wars. He had one of the Millennium Falcon, and like the whole set like looked like Star Wars. And then she played like the Star Wars theme song, but like her own version of it that was like all like crazy. Well, because he works in movies, and because that thing did really well, he ended up getting invited to be at, I think it was Force Awakens, at the red carpet for it. Mm-hmm. He didn't get to actually walk it. He had to check people in. But just because of that, he got to be there that night and like see everybody.
That's
and
still
I'm
really
like,
cool.
holy shit, how did that happen? That's so rad. All right. I don't have that many more cool stories, so I'm not going to share any yet. I have to like build up some new really cool stories. Okay, so the internet and social media game are constantly evolving. Like I was talking to you again, like off mic about Instagram stuff. Like I've kind of figured out over time, and I've just through reading and different things, like this is kind of how that stuff works. For somebody else that right now they're 18 and they're putting duct tape leaves covering their spots, you know what I mean, doing a little Ivy thing. Can you give any advice to somebody that is like trying to start their own little cosplay thing, whether it's hop on TikTok, make your first video, or like what kind of advice can you give somebody that wants to hop into that?
Yeah, definitely when you're always doing social media, always stay safe. Sometimes it's like not putting your actual age and putting I'm a minor. That definitely helps with like some people. Make sure not to put like very specific information out there, because sometimes with like one thing, it's easy to find out everything else about you. I've seen like one person find out just their full name, and sometimes it's very unsafe for like minors or like anybody on the internet. So just making sure that you personally are safe with everything that you put out there, whether it be like information, your P.O. box, or like anything like that.
Yeah, you got to be careful. It's unfortunate that you even have to be, but realistically, that is one thing that I think people as a whole, throughout the whole world, they need to recognize the power that the internet has, right? And anything you put out there, So like you may put something out there on the internet that doesn't matter to you right now, but in 3 years when all of a sudden like you're trying to run for office, now this thing matters. Or in 3 years all of a sudden you're cosplaying and all this stuff is really huge and now you have all this other information that people have access to. I would just tell people in general, be wary, because I also say it all the time on the show that like don't put something out publicly until it's the best of your abilities. And it's for the same general reason of like, just think things through before you put something out on that level, talk to your friends about it or whatever, and think things through before all of a sudden you just put things out to the world.
Yeah, there's definitely a draft button for a reason on most platforms. Like leave it in there, think about it for a bit, and then post it after talking to people.
Absolutely. So now that we're at the end of the episode, do you have any other last words? Any other things you want to bring up? Do you have any shout outs that you want to give to anybody?
Definitely go check out Jesslyn Cupcake. She's wonderful and I love her so much. I don't really know.
That's it. Okay, so then everybody can go find you again where? It's on Instagram at midnight_Mary_, correct?
Correct.
TikTok is just Midnight Mary.
Correct.
So everyone's going to listen and they're going to join my Patreon because that's the best way to support me at this point. There's going to be all kinds of extra content. And then they're going to go to yours. They're going to go to your Linktree, sign a couple of petitions, and then buy you one of the cosplay things you need off Amazon. So thanks again for coming on the show. Thank you for letting me into your sweet apartment. We'll probably take a couple of quick selfies before I dip out. But yeah, thanks again for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.